This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McChlery. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmcclery.com. This episode is sponsored by the book God's Eye View by Trevor Lerman, PhD, and is available now from hemisphericpress.com, as well as other online retailers. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Christian Book Blurb podcast, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time, as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives, and their faith. Well, I'm your host, Matt McChlery. Thanks for clicking over here and joining us today. Now, on today's show, I'm going to be speaking with Chine McDonald all about shattering the myth of perfect motherhood. So, Chinny, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us. You have recently released a new book called Unmaking Mary. Can you tell us briefly what it's all about?
Yes, so I wrote Unmaking Mary after having my second child. And for me, motherhood really kind of completely changed me as a person, but also changed my relationship to the world and helped me to see God differently. And what I realised was that in my motherhood journey, I had felt like the expectations that I had of motherhood didn't really match up to the reality, or the other way around. The reality was so much more so much harder, so much more textured, so much more love than I could have imagined. And I realised that the ideas and the images and the narratives that are put out about motherhood in culture and art and I guess our church theology over many centuries has painted quite a one-dimensional picture of motherhood. And I thought that one of the ways in which one of the things that best demonstrates how motherhood is put out there in our culture is through how Mary, Mother of Jesus, is represented through art in particular and through culture. So she is often presented as this very perfect, beautiful, young, white, serene, doting mother. If you think about European art galleries or even how she's spoken about in church. But actually her story is far more interesting than that, just like motherhood is. It's more textured. She was a mother. I think she was chosen as a mother, and that tells us something also about who God is. So the book really explores motherhood through the lens of Mary and her where she appears in the Bible, how she appears and shows up in the world as well.
Really fascinating. I've enjoyed reading your book. Now, you focus your book on Mary, the Mother of Jesus. Where does this sort of interest or fascination come from? Is it just sort of cultural references and the fact that she's Mary's mother, or is it something a bit more than that? Are you Catholic, for example? Where has this sort of interest in Mary come from?
Yeah, so I'm not Catholic. I grew up in a kind of evangelical Protestantism, and really I didn't pay much attention to Mary for most of my life. And Mary was only really ever mentioned at Christmas, and she was only really ever talked about as someone who did as she was told. That's kind of like messages that I was taking from the church references to her. What I found, though, that was over the past few years, as I was devouring secular books about motherhood, as I was becoming a mother myself, most secular writers on motherhood at some point talk about Mary. They talk about Mary as this perfect ideal. And for me, as someone who's interested in how Christianity, how religion shows up in the world and in the mainstream, I think that's really interesting. So Mary is a touch point for both Christians and non-Christians, this idea of motherhood. So I found that fascinating. And as I started to think more about her and what's the expectations about motherhood, where they come from, I thought she was a really interesting person to look at, because there are thousands of images of Mary. There are many, many stories and myths and ideas that surround her, theologies around her. So she is a fascinating character. There aren't many women spoken of in the Bible in general, but she, relatively has quite a few instances in which she shows up in the New Testament. So there's lots of material to kind of keep me fascinated, and lots of books written about her.
Really good. You mentioned myth around Mary just now, and I know in the book you use the term myth quite a bit, but you don't really use it to describe something that's like a made-up story, like, we might say myths and legends. You're kind of hinting at something sort of mysterious and magical, but didn't really happen. But you use the term myth a bit differently. Could you just explain what you mean when you speak about the myth of Mary in the book?
Yeah, so I talk about the myth of perfect motherhood. And in some ways I talk about the myths that surround Mary. So yes, I'm not questioning whether or not Mary existed. Mary did exist. She was a person. But I kind of think a helpful way for me to explain this is if you think about Winston Churchill. Right? Winston Churchill was a man who existed, but there has been so much more that has been added to this person of Churchill that he has come to symbolize brave leadership, courage, Britishness, all of these surrounding myths around him and quotes around him that aren't actually things that
quotes that aren't his quotes. Yeah, exactly.
Quotes that aren't his quotes. So when I'm talking about Mary, I'm talking about all of the things that have been added to this person. So if you look at art that depicted Mary from the Middle Ages, she was depicted as this kind of regal queen of heaven with, royal crown and gold. At other points, she's depicted as a kind of a lowly housewife. So these are almost kind of just extra things that a society or a culture has added to Mary's person. And used her as a lens through which to communicate other things about what that society wants to put forward.
Very interesting. These extra layers that we've kind of put on a person to become something more or something other than the person that they really are. So, that's really interesting. Now, yes, your book does focus quite a lot on Mary and sort of looking at all this extra stuff around her, and then also kind of trying to find out a bit more sort of behind the scenes type stuff, which is great. But your book is also partly autobiographical as well. I've really enjoyed reading some of your personal story in there. So can you just share with our audience some of your experiences of motherhood, and even some of the ideas of perfect motherhood that you've personally wrestled with? Can you just share some of that with us?
Yeah, I start the book at this moment for any mother. Any mother will be familiar with this, where you're the early hours of the night and the morning, where young babies, they're not very good at sleeping yet. And there was this one particular night where I think my second child had been up for about 3 hours, from midnight to 3 a.m. This is torture. This is torturous. And I remember kind of picking him up and shouting, "Go to sleep." And then I took him downstairs, got into the car without any shoes on, strapped him in his car seat, and just did the only thing that I could think of doing, which was driving around and round. And that was the only thing that I knew would get him to sleep. So I remember in that moment just feeling mad, feeling kind of out of control, feeling like a bad mother, feeling guilty, and feeling absolutely exhausted. And I remember thinking, I did not feel like I measured up to this perfect ideal of motherhood that I had in my head, that I was failing, maybe everyone else wasn't. So this kind of comparison and this kind of constant sense of failing is part of many mothers' stories. Now, there are many more stories in the book, so I also talk about the mental load of motherhood. So all of the things that that mothers often have to do, as you know, especially working mothers who go to work but also still have to do all of the kind of thinking about the kids, making dinner, cleaning, all of these things, and feeling that like I wasn't perfect in either work or at home. So those are some of the kind of the real stories that that I probably overshare in the book, but it's basically I felt like I didn't measure up. However, it's not all negative. So in the book, there are things I talk about my journey of becoming a mother and being a mother that I think are really beautiful. The kind of the love that I have for my child, the fact that even after very, very little sleep, maybe closing my eyes for 3 minutes and then hearing my baby cry, that immediate jumping up and going to soothe my baby, despite the exhaustion, despite the anger, tells us kind of something of the nature of God's love for us, like that God loves us regardless of anything that we do. There's also the kind of the very bodily act of, if you carry and birth your own children, of feeling and knowing that I'm an embodied person, that we are not just souls, we're not just kind of ghosts in a machine. We are embodied, and that's also something from Mary's story that I found really interesting. Mary, someone who gave birth, and kind of carried and nurtured a child physically, is something that I think that I used to see Mary in a completely different way, as someone whose body matters too.
Yeah, well, this whole embodiment of the human experience is it's really important, because, as you say, we're not just sort of a spirit. Spirit is part of it, but we're also an embodied spirit, especially right now, and even in the resurrection to come, we're going to be given new bodies. So yet again, there's this embodiment going on, and Jesus himself is an embodiment of the Godhead. So yeah, it's very interesting and very important to acknowledge the embodiment. So that's great. So you mentioned as well where some of these ideas of perfect motherhood come from, and you've mentioned sort of Renaissance art and things, especially around the person of Mary. But then you also had an interesting section in the book where you then kind of related that to how those sort of ideas and ideals of the past are now being reflected in a modern day expression, or using modern culture or society's language. So what might this look like? And rather than just going to an art gallery and looking at an old painting from hundreds of years ago, how do these ideas of perfect motherhood filter through in today's culture?
Yes, I think the modern day equivalent of the Madonna and child imagery is found on Instagram. So if you go onto social media, you will find that many women are also, I guess, falling into the trap of presenting a very perfect ideal of their motherhood. And I know that I do this myself. So you'll never find an image of my children where they are shouting, when they're not eating their food, when they are being slow at getting ready for school and nursery. You'll find pictures of them smiling. You'll find them smiling in front of parts of my house that look tidy. So we're all kind of perpetuating this idea that we have got it all together. And I think for women today, that it therefore reinforces this idea that we're the only ones failing, really, because everyone else, even the people like me, it doesn't have to even be the mother of God or a celebrity. It's kind of people like me who are doing much better than I am. There are also kind of so that's kind of normal, everyday women sharing photos and things on social media. But there are also a very particular trend of things like trad wives. So the trad wife movement is a social media phenomenon where women who often have lots of children will do lots of kind of photos and videos of them looking beautiful, but also
matching outfits.
But they also milk their own cows. They bake their own bread. They make their own jam. They kind of hark back to a nostalgic ideal of the past. And they make a lot of money from it. These are kind of the exacerbated versions of these kind of very perfect ideals that anyone can just see if they kind of go onto social media.
And we've also got celebrity. Carl, you have a story about Beyonce as well. You mentioned in your book. Could you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'm a Beyonce fan, but I would say Beyonce. There are often, if you look at kind of cultural icons and imagery, there are many people replicating historic artistic imagery of Mary. So Beyonce has done this, where she kind of, I think it was a photo shoot where she looked like looked like Mary, was dressed up in the kind of the blue, had all this kind of lots of symbolism that is included in Marian imagery, as it's called. So you see again these cultural influences continuing today, including in celebrity culture as well.
And my wife was watching, it was a police series with me the other day, and one of the female characters was pregnant, and we've watched a previous sort of episode, several seasons ago, when another character was pregnant in the storyline. And we kind of looked at each other and we were like, oh no, here we go again. And it was basically, such unrealistic representation of pregnancy, and sort of, you still fight the bad guys whilst you're giving birth, and even once the process is finished, you kind of give your baby a peck of the cheek, but then you jump out the window and you carry on fighting the bad guys. And it's just like, this just isn't real, but this is what's kind of presented as normal, and this is what the media's kind of showing us. And yes, okay, we look at it and think, well, that's a bit ridiculous because we've been there. But it sort of feeds into that. It's taken it to like an absurd level, I guess. But it still feeds into that notion of what you were talking about of, I don't know, you've just given birth, but then the next month you expect your belly to be this complete sort of washboard, swimsuit ready, everything else going on, but that's just not how it is in real life.
Yeah, and that adds to just women feeling bad about themselves. I think this kind of obsession with snapping back to your pre-birth body or genes, when actually something profoundly different and life-changing has happened. There was a study that was done in the US, I think, which looked at how mothers are portrayed in TV and film, and it's often that they are often very beautiful aesthetically. They're often kind of they always have makeup, and they're always slim, and so there aren't many depictions of kind of the variety of different types of mother that might be, or types of body. I think also with pregnancy and childbirth, I kind of get why this happens, because the human race has to continue, so people have to not be absolutely terrified of having children. But the depictions and the portrayals of pregnancy and childbirth in culture are so not the reality. They're not realistic. Even though I watched every episode of One Born Every Minute from the TV, it was still very, very different to what I had expected. But maybe we just have to all pretend that it's okay, so people still choose to have children.
So we've got this sort of idealized, perfect kind of image being pushed out to us in all different ways of what perfect motherhood should look like. So your book's called Unmaking Mary, and unmaking this notion of perfect motherhood. So what are some things that we can do to try and speak truth rather than hold this unrealistic ideal up?
Yeah, I think even though the dominant picture that might come to someone's mind when they imagine Mary is one of the kind of nativity scene, young and beautiful and serene, actually there are stories within Scripture itself that tell us and where we might find some solidarity or might find some reality in Mary's story. And I'll just mention two. The first is in the passage of Scripture where Jesus goes missing for 3 days, and they Mary and Joseph kind of traveling. They've left Jerusalem, and they kind of think, "Oh, where is Jesus?" And every mother and every parent will know that feeling when you think you lost your child. And obviously, they hurried back, and then they found him in the temple, and he says, "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house?" But she before that says, "Didn't you know that we'd be worried about you?" That to me is a very human and a very normal experience for a mother, is to worry and to worry about your children. But actually, there's been some parts of the theological tradition that have tried to write that away because of this idea that Mary is sinless and that worry is sinful. So I would hold on to that kind of maternal worry that Mary has. But also, this is a woman who watches her son die on the cross. And the reality of the maternal experience is that it's not all beautiful. It is painful. Life itself is hard. Terrible things happen to our children. And Mary bearing witness to that, this strong tradition of Mary as someone who understands suffering, I think is really valuable. And just one more, which is the Magnificat in Luke's passage, where it's before Mary has Jesus, but she is singing this prophetic song of justice, talking about the mighty being cast down from their thrones, the rich being sent away empty. She is a prophetic woman, and many of the women I know who are mothers, many of the women I know full stop, are absolutely committed to making things right, making things better in the world for our children, but also all other children too, for the future.
And you're a mother yourself, as you said, of two children. What advice would you give to any mothers who might be listening today?
So my advice would be to rest in the fact that none of us are perfect. That is the part of the beauty of the Christian story, is this recognition that we can't live up to a perfect standard by ourselves, that Jesus is perfect, that there is grace for us in the things that we get wrong, in the pain and the exhaustion and the trying to do well. There is grace for us. So my advice is to exhale in the grace that God has for us, rather than striving for perfection ourselves.
That's really good advice. Thank you, Chinny. Now, we're going to be back talking to Chinny about her life and her faith just after these, so do stay tuned. Who are we? Why are we here? Why is there something rather than nothing? For millennia, these were religious questions. Then suddenly, they became scientific ones. God's eye view reveals that a great lie has been told to us about science. The great fathers of early science were not reductionists, rationalists, and materialists. They were deists, mystics, and seekers. We have been told that science and religion are opposed to one another, but in fact there may be two sides of the same coin. God's eye view tells the story of 2 centuries of experimental evidence that show us reality is not what we have been led to believe. Rather than explain away mystery, the quantum revolution reveals a universe brimming with mystery. The scientific discoveries which characterized the 20th century reveal a much deeper truth, that the two great opposing philosophical forces, science and religion, point to the same stunning explanation. Grab yourself a copy of God's Eye View by Trevor Lerman, PhD, from hemisphericpress.com, as well as other online retailers. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McChlery to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors. Hello, welcome back to the Christian Book Club podcast. I've been chatting with author Chine McDonald about her book, Unmaking Mary, Shattering the Myth of Perfect Motherhood. If you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, do go and check out her book, Unmaking Mary. Now, at this point in the podcast, Chinny, we like to speak about you as a person. So what do you like to do for fun?
Well, my ideal day would be to go for brunch. That's my favourite meal, with a book. I love books. I love reading. I do read a lot for work, non-fiction, but I think for fun I would read fiction. So reading and then going to the cinema by myself, which is one of my guilty pleasures, is just sitting in a cinema, watching a film by myself, the lights down. Yeah, that's what I do.
So what's the non-fiction book you're reading at the moment called?
Oh gosh, so I've just read a book called What Are Children For?, which is all about the decline in fertility rates and the increase in choice, and then kind of changing reasons why young people in particular choosing not to have children. So yeah, it's a fascinating book.
That sounds good. All right. Do you like eating by yourself, or do you like to sort of go out to restaurants and things with friends or family? Do you get much chance with children?
I do if I go by myself and my husband's at home. But I go, yeah, I do like meeting friends for dinner. But I also love having friends over. One of my favorite things to do is cook. So some kind of feasting menu where I love a menu where you can just create bowls of things and everyone dives in the middle. So often kind of Middle Eastern food is my kind of favorite.
Oh, I was going to say, do you have a particular type of food? Middle Eastern, okay, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I went to a Turkish restaurant recently, so that was really nice, really good.
Nice.
Wonderful. Do you do anything else? So I know you're an author. You're an author.
Yes.
You write, and you do lots of reading for your job. So do you have a job that also involves other things, or is it just sort of reading and writing and writing and reading? How does it work?
No, I've got a day job, which is I'm director of Theos, which is the Religion and Society think tank in Westminster. So we do, we're all about trying to articulate a compelling vision for human flourishing in society based on kind of Christianity and Christian ideas. So we do research, events, media, public engagement, podcasts.
Pretty busy, yeah.
Pretty busy, yeah.
Pretty busy, yeah. Good. So I presume you're based in London then with that kind of job.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, tea or coffee?
Coffee. I'm a coffee person. I might have tea if I'm feeling lazy.
The do-it-yourself kind at home, or the posh sort that you get in a expensive shop somewhere?
All of the above. I do have a coffee machine, that's what I've got here. Coffee machine, cafetiere, and instant if it's really if
you're really desperate. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. And when you have your coffee, is it just coffee, or do you get something else on the side, like a little bit of cake or a sticky bun or a biscuit, or nothing really?
Well, depends. Okay, so afternoonsies, if that's the
Okay, all
thing.
right.
I might have
Yeah.
I might have a biscuit,
Okay.
or a twirl.
Oh, twirls. That's this flake with extra chocolate on. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you love your brunch and you like your afternoonsies as well. That's great. Oh, that's wonderful. We're getting to know you, Chinny. This is good. This is good. So what is the Holy Spirit doing in your life, or what is he showing you personally at the moment?
Yeah, I think that because of my kind of life and work and the kind of things I'm engaged in,
Hmm.
I feel like part of what we're called to be and do in this time is build bridges across divides. So I'm feeling like, this is a really scary time for people,
Hmm.
with a lot of kind of turbulence and instability and polarization. And I think as the people of God, we have to do better at holding difference together. So I'm feeling that in kind of daily in my work, and also the people that I'm being brought into contact with, that actually we're all people made in God's image, and we need to try and live together well, which means understanding and listening to each other.
Great. And my next question is about what are you currently working on, or what you've got coming up next. So it could be writing related, or it could be something to do with your think tank work, or anything like that. Have we got something in the pipeline that you might be able to give us a sort of a little taster of, or a sort of a preview before it enters the world?
Yeah, it's probably relevant to both things. So at Theos, we're doing a big kind of 2-year research project on motherhood. It's called Motherhood Inside Out. So it looks at the kind of socio-political, spiritual change that happens when one becomes a mother. So it's a kind of series of interviews, focus groups, analysis, but also some kind of creative things that we're doing alongside it. So that'll be launched in May next year. But before that, we also did a kind of four-part documentary podcast called Motherhood versus the Machine, which looked at kind of the changing nature of motherhood in light of technological advancement. So artificial wombs, those machines that can rock your baby to sleep. What does that do to the maternal experience? What happens when a mother is sidelined for technology, and the implications of that.
Fascinating stuff. Now, where can we find you on social media, or on a website maybe? Where can we buy your book, Unmaking Mary?
Yeah, you can find everything on chinnymcdonald.com. That's CHIN for November E McDonald.com, and also theosthinktank.co.uk. So all of the things and all the places to find me are there.
Wonderful. I'll put a link to your website in this episode's show notes. So if you're listening and you want to find out more about Chinny and her book and the things she's involved with, do just click on there and you'll find everything you need. So thank you, Chinny. It's great. It just leaves me to say thank you so much for the pleasure of your company and for this very interesting discussion all about Mary and motherhood. So thank you for joining us here on Christian Book Blurb.
Thank you, Matt.
A big thank you to this episode's sponsor, the book God's Eye View by Trevor Lerman, PhD. Grab yourself a copy now from hemisphericpress.com. And thank you as well for listening to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb podcast. Don't forget, it comes out on the 1st and the 15th of every month, so it'll only be a few short weeks before I'm back again with another Christian author speaking all about their books, their life, and their faith to help you in your discipleship, one book at a time. Go ahead, like the episode, like the podcast, share it with your friends, and I can't wait to have the pleasure of your company again really soon. Thank you, and goodbye. Thanks for listening to Christian Book Blurb with your host, Matt McChlery. Do give it a like, give it a share, and let your friends know all about it. We do hope to see you again soon on another Christian Book Blurb.